that people will stay safe.
Then oiling it either with a folded paper towel or I've made a
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, July 6th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. It's official. At midnight, indoor operations at several businesses across San Diego will have to shut down again. Today, county health officials announced 274 new coronavirus cases, bringing the total to 17,000. No additional deaths were reported. Leaders across the U.S. are admitting that a spike in new cases proves states reopened too soon. Emily Schmidt has more from Washington.
It's proving hard to find a balance between pandemic crowds and pandemic caution. People pack beaches.
You can't do funerals, but we've got hundreds of people down here on the beach.
While 32 states report a rise in cases, according to Johns Hopkins University.
Clearly, it is not over.
More than 27,000 new cases in Florida reported over the long holiday weekend. Hoboken, New Jersey's mayor says most of its 13 new cases came from people visiting hotspots like Florida and Texas.
This is the highest two-day total in Hoboken since mid-May.
Monday, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration granted emergency use authorization for a coronavirus antigen test that can get results in 15 minutes. The White House says there's reason for optimism.
You have the United States at a low case mortality rate. It's because of the extraordinary work that we've done.
Goldman Sachs cut its third quarter economic forecast due to COVID's resurgence, and parts of Florida announcing a pause and some rollback of the reopening.
It's a result of people being so sick that they need that kind of extreme life support. So we have to do something.
COVID-19 cases and disruption still on the rise. In Washington, Emily Schmidt, KPBS News.
And the South Bay remains the epicenter of San Diego's coronavirus outbreak. There are still more cases in zip codes there than anywhere else in the county. But KPBS reporter Claire Tregesser says if you want to know where cases are increasing the most, look no further than Pacific Beach.
The El Prez restaurant located in the Pacific Beach area.
Toward the end of May, County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher specifically called out a Pacific Beach restaurant, El Prez, for having huge crowds of people not wearing masks. The bar was then shut down. But that hasn't stopped big crowds from gathering on the Pacific Beach boardwalk and beach, as well as in bars and restaurants. And along with the crowds has come a spike in cases. On June 15th, the Pacific Beach zip code had 70 cases. By June 30th, the number had jumped to 181. Zip codes in Fallbrook and Point Loma also saw some of the biggest increases in the county during that period. A.L. Oren, an epidemiologist at San Diego State University, urged caution in drawing any hard conclusions from the analysis. But he says the trends align with the news about outbreaks in bars and restaurants.
Places are not following
the practices that have been shown to minimize risk or limit the risk more, then yes, I do think that puts people at increased risk.
He also says the trend also aligns with the surge in cases among young people.
There's been some discussion around, whether people have not been as careful as they need to be since Memorial Day and taking proper precautions, which remain keeping socially distanced and from other groups, that's 6 feet or more, and wearing a face mask at all times, as much as possible, and proper sanitation.
Meanwhile, the South Bay, including Chula Vista, National City, and Southeast San Diego, still have by far the highest number of cases in the county. But those areas have had slower rates of increase in recent weeks. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
And you can see just how many cases there are in your neighborhood. Look for the Tracking COVID-19 section at kpbs.org, and you'll find COVID-19 cases broken down by zip code. At least 60 nursing homes have reported COVID-19 infections in San Diego County, and 14 have reported deaths from the virus. iNewsSource investigative reporter Jill Castellano found years of staffing shortages have left them vulnerable to the pandemic.
Experts agree the struggle to control COVID-19 in nursing homes has been made worse by years of staffing cutbacks that increase profits but sacrifice patient care. Now, scaled-back teams of nursing home employees are left scrambling to tend to overwhelming volumes of sick patients.
There's not the staff that it really takes to do the job they need to do, looking in and taking care of everybody and meeting all their obligations under the law.
Philip Lindsley is an attorney at the San Diego Elder Law Center. He says because of staffing shortages, the families of nursing home residents are important advocates to make sure their relatives are getting what they need.
Family plays an extremely important role. One, they are a set of eyes. The staffing at skilled nursing facilities isn't always what it should be.
An iNewsSource analysis shows 84% of San Diego's skilled nursing facilities don't have enough nursing assistants, and 63% don't have enough registered nurses to meet minimum staffing levels recommended by researchers. State nursing home regulators suspended most on-site inspections in March to slow the spread of the virus. 1 week later, the county barred family members from entering nursing homes. Without those two oversight groups, relatives of nursing home residents in San Diego worry about what's happening to their loved ones behind closed doors. That's why Rosa Montiel spends hours each day sitting outside a window at the San Diego Post-Acute Nursing Home in El Cajon. She wants to make sure her sister Lily, who suffers from Down syndrome and epilepsy, is taken care of. And she's terrified of what a COVID-infected staffer could do.
I mean, one staff person bringing it in would be devastating. I mean, it would be the end. It would be the end of her life, the end of many of them, of their lives. I don't want to think about it. And yet, it's part of our reality, part of what we have to live with every day.
Lindsley, the elder care attorney, said he hopes this crisis at nursing homes will lead to new laws and standards to resolve the staffing shortages that have plagued these facilities for years. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource investigative reporter Jill Castellano.
And to see which nursing homes have the most COVID-19 cases, go to iNewsSource.org. iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. New restrictions on several San Diego County businesses start at midnight tonight. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has the details.
More COVID-19 restrictions are here. Indoor operations are being prohibited at restaurants, wineries, tasting rooms, and movie theaters. Also at family entertainment centers, zoos, museums, and card rooms.
These are not decisions that anyone takes lightly, and they're not decisions that are not taken understanding the very difficult strain and stresses you're under. They are decisions that are put in place and designed in order to slow the spread.
The restrictions come as San Diego County is seeing an unusually high number of cases and was on the state's watch list for 3 days.
And in the last 10 days, perhaps in the last 2 weeks in particular, we've seen a concerning rate of spread.
For restaurants and bars that serve food, this means their dining rooms are closing again. They will only be able to serve meals outside and can still do takeout and delivery sales.
But if we can make some modest adjustments now, get these numbers under control, then the hope is that we can resume and begin to move forward together.
The restrictions do not apply to indoor operations at personal care businesses like salons, barbershops, or even at retail stores. They'll be in effect for at least 3 weeks. At the county level, we're hitting coronavirus triggers for case rate, community outbreaks, and the percentage of cases investigated, and officials are seeing a shift.
Our older populations, our numbers are actually going down, but they are going up in the 20 actually it's primarily the 20 to 29 age group.
Can you safely reopen? I believe you can, but with enforcement and with individual responsibility.
Today, the governor applauded Californians for generally acting responsibly over the 4th of July holiday weekend, and he thanked some cities for increasing enforcement of people not following the rules.
From West Hollywood, Santa Monica, and others, notably, we're stepping up their enforcement using local law enforcement.
Over the weekend, Newsom says officials from the state alcoholic beverage control made thousands of contacts at bars and restaurants that customers have complained about.
Significant improvement and increase in enforcement over the weekend. Most of it, again, from an educational paradigm, though there was plenty of citations. Local law enforcement, we are requesting more information about local enforcement on masks.
While we are seeing an increase in cases and the rate of cases statewide, we have not yet seen a substantial increase in hospitalizations or deaths.
That said, those are lagging indicators: hospitalizations, ICUs, and deaths.
Newsom does say statewide hospitalizations are up 50% over the last few weeks. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Today, a group of San Diego racial justice organizations unveiled a package of proposals intended to increase police accountability. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen has more.
As the wave of protests against racism and police brutality dies down, activists in San Diego are taking the conversation from the streets to local government. The Coalition for Police Accountability and Transparency, or CPAT, says their recommendations are about preventing the over-policing of minority communities. One of the changes the group wants to see is a ban on pretext stops. This happens when an officer stops someone on suspicion of criminal activity but doesn't have probable cause to arrest them. Bishop Cornelius Bowser says the stops are a major source of disparities in how police treat people of color versus white people.
We know that in our community, especially in Black and brown communities, we have a lot. That's the way the police use to pull people over and racially profile is through a pretext stop. We say that quite often in the city of San Diego.
The group is asking supporters to join in a week of activism, which includes contacting elected officials to gain their support for the reform proposals. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Hundreds of people have been transferred from California's prisons to immigrant detention centers, possibly accelerating the spread of COVID-19. Now, as KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler tells us, some lawmakers want to put a stop to it.
Advocates and lawmakers are now focused on a major contributor to the continued spread of the virus inside immigration detention: people who have finished their prison term and are transferred to ICE custody for possible deportation. Over 250 people have been transferred from California prisons to ICE detention since Governor Newsom issued a stay-at-home order. Among them were 3 people who had already tested positive for COVID-19 in early June while in prison in Riverside County. Their transfers were allowed to go ahead anyway. Bay Area Assemblymember Rob Bonta is one of 50 state legislators, including San Diego's Ben Wesso, who sent a letter to Governor Gavin Newsom today asking him to issue an executive order stopping these transfers.
This is what meeting the moment looks like. This is a governor who has met the moment time and time again. I'm confident and hopeful that he'll meet it again with us on this issue and be our partner and work with us to make sure we're doing right by our Californians in custody who do not need to be sent to potential death sentences in immigration detention centers.
Last week, a Cambodian refugee was released from San Quentin prison directly to his family. Advocates say it's safer for immigrants facing deportation who have already served prison sentences to continue their immigration case from home, and not in immigration detention, where coronavirus has run rampant. Charles Joseph was sent to the Mesa Verde Detention Center after being released from prison. A judge ordered his release this April as COVID-19 began to spread in the detention center.
Why are people being imprisoned in detention for indeterminate sentences over a civil matter, even though they have families, communities, homes, and the ability to appear for court appointments?
The Otay Mesa Detention Center has had 167 positive cases of coronavirus since March. ICE did not respond to a request for comment about how many people have been transferred from state prison to the facility. Max Nadler, KPBS News.
In New York City, a white woman who called police on a black man after he asked her to keep her dog on a leash is facing charges.
There is an African-American man. I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. I'm being threatened by a man in the Ramble. Please send the cops immediately.
So cell phone video shows Amy Cooper telling a 911 operator that the man who was bird watching at the park was threatening her life. Now Manhattan's district attorney is prosecuting her for filing a false report. Firefighters have their hands full with a large blaze in the northern Los Angeles community of Santa Clarita. The 1,300-acre fire was sparked by illegal fireworks and is now 30% contained. The Soledad fire is burning near the 14 freeway, and crews are trying to keep it away from some 5,000 homes that are threatened. Warm, windy weather is also making the firefight difficult. And here in San Diego, the heat is on across the county, and it looks like this weekend could really be a scorcher. Justin Povic has your forecast.
Oh, good Monday. Temperatures, well, those have been on the rise, especially back over the interior, but a little change coming up here over the course of the next couple of days. Again, we'll see an area of low pressure bring down some slightly cooler air, again, heading toward Tuesday and Wednesday. Along with that, we'll start to see that marine layer, again, that area of low clouds and fog extend out from the coast towards some of the inland valleys. Further off toward the east over the mountainous terrain into the deserts, we'll actually have some gusty winds kicking up Tuesday afternoon, some of those topping 30 to 35 miles per hour. And beyond Thursday, big ridge of high pressure builds back in. We'll start to see temperatures responding and climbing back up. Well, they're not climbing tonight. They're going back down. Mount Laguna dropping down to 59 degrees. Borrego Springs down to 78. And Ramona down to 54. Oceanside, San Diego, either side of 60 degrees as we venture our way into tomorrow. Lots of sunshine back over the interior, but we're going to see again some morning clouds, especially toward the shoreline. Some of the patchy fog extending a little further inland than previous days, and that'll hold our temperatures down just a little bit more. Again, notice San Diego topping off at 76, Oceanside at 78 degrees. So overall, when we look at the Southwest collectively, it's a pretty typical July pattern on Tuesday. Widespread dry air in place, but again, that settle drop in the mercury coming down just a little bit, and you can kind of see where the jet stream is dipping down. The heat, though, later on in the week will begin to build back from south to north. Notice the coolest conditions at the coast, again, with that onshore flow in place. Let's break it down. Then temperatures down just a tiny bit the next couple of days, and then we're going to start to climb back late week. As I talked about the late week warming trend coming up here. Inland, similar situation, numbers climbing Friday into Saturday. Over the mountainous terrain, gusty winds Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday into Saturday. Temperatures on the rise, and over the deserts, we'll be back into the 1-teens Friday into Saturday. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather's meteorologist Justin Povic. Back to you.
A federal judge has ordered a temporary shutdown of the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline. The judge ruled that the oil pipeline must be shut down by August 5th and emptied for an in-depth environmental review. It's a major win for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and environmental groups who have fought against the pipeline for years. The Army Corps of Engineers says it will take about 13 months to create the environmental impact report. Today, the Supreme Court ruled that states can require presidential electors to back their state's popular vote winner in the Electoral College. 32 states and the District of Columbia have laws intended to discourage so-called faithless electors. Justice Elena Kagan wrote the court's unanimous decision. It said a state may instruct electors that they have no ground for reversing the vote of millions of its citizens. The right to vote is something many treasure, some take for granted, and many more don't use. But how that vote came to be for women goes back more than a century in this country. As we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, we take a look back at how San Diegans played a part.
Inside the Women's Museum of California,
In a room lined with clothes, buttons, postcards, and political signs,
This was the poem.
President of the museum, Anne Hoiberg, reads from a poem written by a suffragist more than a century ago.
For the long work day, for the taxes we pay, for the laws we obey, we want something to say. Isn't that perfect?
But who were these trailblazers fighting for women's right to vote? And more specifically, how did San Diegans play a part? In 1895, Susan B. Anthony, the famous leader of the national suffrage movement, paid a visit to the then sleepy town of San Diego.
And the town was so excited, the famous Susan B. Anthony. She spoke at the Methodist Church, standing room only.
Determined that California women would get the right to vote, in 1896, Anthony led the first local campaign. The amendment passed in San Diego, but for the state,
Down to failure, which was very disappointing.
At the time, women were considered to be morally superior to men, and there was a fear of what steps they would take in society should they be able to vote, particularly on the issue of prohibition. Women's suffrage could hurt the liquor industry. It wasn't for another 15 years, in 1911, that women would seize another opportunity, this time led by a local, Point Loma resident Dr. Charlotte Baker.
She would deliver a baby in the morning, and then the afternoon she would dedicate to civic duties. And so she became president of the San Diego Women's Suffrage Association.
Suffragists got organized.
Now the Temperance Army's marching.
With support from other prominent women, like Flora Kimball of National City, Ellen Browning Scripps, and attorney Clara Shortridge Foltz. The local suffragists used a three-pronged strategy they believed was sure to work. For starters, instead of protest, the women used the power of persuasion.
And these women would go into a man's home, and they would sit with that man and talk about the importance of women getting the right to vote. And they wouldn't leave until they convinced him. And they even said they were conducting invasions of men's homes.
The women took advantage of the times. The California Exposition was coming to San Diego, and Balboa Park was having a groundbreaking ceremony in July of 1911. For their second strategy, the suffragists would parade. They decorated a float with yellow ribbon promoting their clear message of equality.
And they called it the Modern Boston Tea Party Float. And it also had on there, taxation without representation is tyranny now as it was in 1773.
For the most part, San Diego County was still a rural town. Agriculture was highly dependent on the labor of women. The suffragists knew they had to reach the outlying communities by using their third strategy, automobile campaigning. The campaign started on a Monday morning.
4 women left San Diego for Oceanside. It probably took them several hours to get there. The roads were probably rutted, dusty, dirty, what have you.
From there, they drove to speak to men in Escondido, then to Fallbrook, and finally to Ramona.
Can you imagine? It took 3 days to cover our county, and it was highly successful. And then October 1911, and that was the big election day. Was it going to go down to defeat like it did in 1896, or would it be successful?
It was a win. The final statewide vote was close, with a margin less than 1.5%. In San Diego, the margin was wider, with more than 57% of men voting yes to grant women the right to vote.
When you think of the determination of those suffragists, it just seems unbelievable that the numbers weren't higher.
But the votes were high enough, and California became the 6th state in the country to give women the right to vote, all of which were Western states.
How do you explain that? But I do think it has to do with the sense of equality between men and women, the pioneer spirit, the progressiveness of people who would venture from the East Coast to come out here. To me, that's fascinating.
And you can learn more about how all American women won the right to vote in a new 2-part documentary on American experience called The Vote. You can watch it right here tonight and tomorrow at 9 p.m. on KPBS TV and the PBS Video app. Major League Baseball has announced its schedule for a short 60-game season beginning later this month. Opening night for the Padres will be Friday, July 24th against the Arizona Diamondbacks at Petco Park. The following night's game will be carried nationally on Fox Sports 1. Fans will not be allowed to attend games due to COVID-19 restrictions. The music world lost a legend. Country Music Hall of Famer Charlie Daniels died. Best known for his hit song, Devil Went Down to Georgia, Daniels was an accomplished fiddler and guitarist. Despite a few health setbacks in recent years, he continued to perform. Charlie Daniels was 83.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the first days of July bring the largest daily COVID cases yet in the United States. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And here's another look at today's top stories. At midnight, indoor operations at several businesses across San Diego will have to shut down again. Restaurants, breweries, wineries, and bars will only be able to serve outdoors or to-go orders. Museums and the zoo also have to close indoor exhibits. Today, county health officials announced 274 new coronavirus cases, bringing the total to 17,000. No additional deaths were reported. Pacific Beach has seen some of the biggest jumps in COVID-19 cases in the past month. The zip code went from 70 cases on June 15th to 181 by the end of the month. A doctor says the trend aligned with news about outbreaks in bars and restaurants and among young people. The highest number of cases in the county are in the South Bay, but those areas have had slower rates of increase in recent weeks. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.